So today we're tackling a pretty crucial topic in the world of cybersecurity.
Yeah, definitely top of mind for a lot of folks.
Absolutely. And we're going to be digging into the SOC, why it's absolutely essential in today's threat landscape.
I think that's a good way to put it.
And then we're also going to explore all the different ways that you can actually implement a SOC in your own organization.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
So to guide our conversation today, we've got two really fantastic resources. The first is the Arctic Wolf 2024 Threat Report.
Always love a good threat report. It paints a pretty vivid picture.
Oh, yeah. And then we've also got the Cuebid SOC Guide, which is so pretty practical and kind of lays out, different approaches to actually building out your security.
It's a good 1-2 punch. One side you got the threats, on the other side you got, okay, well, here's how we can actually combat these threats.
Exactly. So let's start by kind of setting the stage here, right? The threat landscape, what's going on out there.
Right, let's do it.
And the Arctic Wolf report, it pulls no punches. It says, look, the threat landscape is not getting any prettier.
No, not at all.
It's getting worse.
Yeah, I think one of the big takeaways right out of the gate is just the massive increase we're seeing in ransomware attacks.
Oh, ransomware.
Yeah.
That's like the word everyone's afraid to even hear at this point.
I know. And for good reason.
Yeah.
I mean, the report talks about, demands going up 20% year over year, which is already scary.
That's a lot.
But then the average demand is now $600,000.
$600,000.
Yeah.
That's enough to put a lot of companies out of business.
Absolutely. And it's not just the financial hit, right? It's the disruption to operations, the reputational damage. It's a whole cascade of problems.
Definitely. And the report also kind of contrasts ransomware with another threat, BEC. Have you heard of BEC?
Yeah, BEC stands for Business Email Compromise.
Okay.
And it's interesting because while BEC is actually 10 times more common than ransomware is 15 times more likely to lead to one of those super expensive incident response engagements.
Oh, so it's like VCC.
Mm-hmm.
You might get away with it without too much damage, but
Right.
ransomware, that's when you're calling in the big guns.
It's like BEC is the mosquito buzzing around your head, annoying but not lethal.
Okay.
Ransomware is the shark attack.
Okay. I like that analogy.
And the report also points out how these ransomware groups are getting way more sophisticated. I mean, they're not just randomly targeting anyone anymore.
Yeah, they're doing their own homework.
They're doing their homework. They're going after specific organizations with, deep pockets and valuable data. They're in it for the big score.
It's big business.
It is big business. And honestly, part of that shift is because law enforcement has been cracking down on some of the smaller players.
Because like pushing them up the food chain.
Exactly. The heat is on, and so they're evolving their tactics.
So the bad guys are getting smarter.
Mm-hmm.
And this report dives into how they're actually pulling off these attacks. And this is where it gets really interesting, I think, for anybody listening right now.
Yeah.
The report says the most common entry point is not some super complex technical vulnerability.
You'd think it would be right.
You would think right.
0-day exploit all this fancy stuff.
Yeah. Turns out it's stolen credentials.
Stolen credentials.
We're talking about over 70% of incidents, starting with an attacker getting their hands on a valid login.
It's wild, isn't it?
It is wild.
I mean, think about it. An attacker gets their hands on your employee's login, walks right in the front door of your network like they own the place.
And nobody even notices because they're using a real account?
Exactly. No alarm bells, no red flags, just blend right in.
That's terrifying. And the report talks about how a lot of this comes down to the human element.
Oh, absolutely.
We all know strong passwords, multi-factor authentication are crucial.
Preaching to the choir, right?
Right. But the reality is a lot of organizations are still struggling with these basic security hygiene practices.
And the attackers know that they're exploiting those weaknesses. They're buying stolen credentials on the dark web, fishing for them, guessing weak passwords.
So you got to ask yourself, right, is my organization doing enough to really lock down those credentials?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it leads perfectly into, the next part of our conversation, which is all about the SOC.
The SOC.
Yeah. Think of a SOC as your organization's 24/7 cybersecurity command center, constantly monitoring for threats, ready to respond.
So if those attackers do manage to slip through the cracks, the SOC is there to catch them.
That's the idea.
I like it. But
Yeah.
how do you actually build a SOC? I mean, where do you even start?
Well, the Cuebid guide, it does a really great job of walking through the different ways you can implement a SOC, and you actually have some options.
Options. Okay, lay it on me.
All right, so first you could go for an internal SOC. That means you're building it all in-house.
So you're hiring your own security team, setting up all the infrastructure.
Exactly. You have full control, which can be a plus.
Yeah, I can see that.
But the downside is it requires a ton of resources expertise, not to mention you got to staff it 24/7.
Oh, yeah. That's not easy.
Not easy at all, especially if you're a smaller organization or, you don't have a massive security budget.
Right. So what's option number 2?
Option number 2 is going with an external SOC, also known as MDR, Managed Detection and Response.
Okay, MDR.
This is where you partner with a specialist like Cuebid, who brings that expertise and technology to the table.
So it's like outsourcing your security to the pros.
Pretty much. And the big advantage here is instant access to a whole team of security professionals and all the latest tools and technologies without having to build it all yourself.
And I imagine that's probably way more cost-effective than trying to do it all in-house.
Oh, yeah. In most cases, it is. You're not paying for salaries, benefits, all that overhead.
Right, so internal SOC, you're building it yourself. External SOC, you're partnering with the experts.
Exactly.
Is there a third option?
There is. There's actually a hybrid approach.
Okay, tell me about the hybrid SOC.
So this is kind of the best of both worlds. You maintain some internal security functions, but you leverage an MDR provider for specific expertise.
Okay, so maybe you have a small internal team, but you bring in the MDR provider to handle things like threat hunting or incident response.
Exactly. Or maybe you just need help during peak times, when your team is stretched thin.
Okay, so you've got options internal, external, hybrid.
Lots of flavors to choose from.
But the key takeaway here is that you got to have a SOC in place, period.
Absolutely. In today's world, it's not a nice to have, it's a must have.
It's like having a security guard for your digital assets, right? Always on patrol, ready to protect you from those who want to do you harm.
I like that analogy. And the Cuebid guide, it goes beyond just, explaining the different models. They actually advocate for a specific approach that they believe is the most effective.
Ooh, okay. Tell me more.
They call it the holistic SOC. Okay, so picture this, right? You've got this amazing high-tech security system for your house.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
You got cameras covering every angle, motion sensors on all the doors and windows.
Top of the line stuff.
But then someone leaves the back gate wide open.
Oh, no.
And that's kind of what a non-holistic SOC is. Like, it might be doing a great job in some areas, but if there are gaps in your defenses, those attackers are going to find them.
So a holistic SOC is about having no blind spots.
Exactly. It's about understanding that threats can come from anywhere. Servers, endpoints, IoT devices, you name it, even human error.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here, but how do you actually put that into practice? I mean, does that mean having a million different security tools all running at the same time?
Well, it's not just about the quantity of tools, it's about how they all work together, and that's where the Cuebid guide gets really into the nitty-gritty.
Okay, let's get into it.
So the heart of a holistic SOC is the SOC platform.
The platform?
Think of it as the central nervous system of your entire security operation.
Okay, so it's connecting all the different pieces of the puzzle.
Exactly. It's gathering data from all those different sources and then correlating it, looking for patterns and anomalies.
So if an attacker is trying to sneak in the platform, is going to see those breadcrumbs they leave behind.
Exactly. And then it can trigger the appropriate response.
Okay, so the platform is like the brain of the operation. What about the eyes and ears? What tools are feeding information into this platform?
Well, there's SIM for starters.
SIM?
It stands for Security Information and Event Management.
That's a mouthful.
I know, right? But it's basically like having a superpowered detective sifting through mountains of data looking for clues.
Clues of an attack.
Exactly. SIM is analyzing logs from firewalls, servers, applications, all that good stuff, looking for those telltale signs that something fishy is going on.
So it's like constantly scanning for those red flags.
You got it. And here's the cool part. SIM isn't just sitting there passively. It's connected to SOAR.
SOAR? What's that stand for?
Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response.
Another mouthful.
I know, but trust me, it's a game changer.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So if SOP spots something suspicious, SOAR kicks into gear automatically.
So it's like the SWAT team ready to roll as soon as the alarm bells go off.
That's a great analogy. SOAR follows these predefined playbooks to contain the threat.
Playbooks like step-by-step instructions on how to neutralize the attack.
Exactly. And it all happens in a fraction of the time it would take a human to react.
Which is crucial when you're dealing with these fast-moving cyber attacks.
Absolutely. Speed is key. And SOAR is all about automating that response to minimize the damage.
Okay, so we've got the brain, the platform, the detective SIM, and the SWAT team SOAR. What else is part of this holistic SOC dream team?
Well, we can't forget about the front lines. Endpoint security.
Endpoint security, right? Because we talked about how attackers often get in through compromised devices.
Exactly. So you got to have a strong defense at that level. And the Cuebid guide highlights two main approaches, EDR and light EDR.
EDR and light EDR, break it down for me.
All right, so EDR stands for endpoint detection and response.
Okay.
It's like having a personal bodyguard for each device on your network, constantly monitoring for suspicious activity.
So it's like a mini security system built into every laptop and server.
Pretty much, EDR can detect and block malware, isolate infected devices, even roll back to a previous state if something goes wrong.
That's pretty powerful stuff.
It is, but then there's also light EDR, which is kind of like EDR's little brother.
Okay.
It focuses on the essential security functions, but it's less resource intensive. So it's a good option for organizations that maybe have older devices or limited budgets.
You've got options depending on your needs and resources.
Exactly. And Cuebid actually offers both EDR and light EDR solutions as part of their MDR service.
So they can help organizations figure out which approach is right for them?
Absolutely. They'll work with you to assess your environment and recommend the best solution.
Okay, so we've got the brain, the detective, the SWAT team, and the bodyguards. Are we missing anything?
Well, we can't forget about the network itself. That's where NDR and DNS monitoring come in.
NDR, DNS monitoring. Okay, I'm taking notes.
So NDR stands for Network Detection and Response.
NDR. Got it.
It's like having surveillance cameras strategically placed throughout your network, constantly watching for unusual activity.
So it's analyzing the traffic flowing between devices, looking for those suspicious conversations that might indicate an attack.
You got it. NDR can detect a whole range of threats, from malware infections to data exfiltration attempts to access sensitive systems.
So it's like having a digital bloodhound sniffing out those hidden trails that attackers try to leave behind.
Love that analogy. And then there's DNS monitoring.
DNS monitoring. What's DNS again?
DNS stands for Domain Name System.
Right, the Internet's phone book.
Exactly. It translates those human-readable website names into numerical IP addresses that computers understand.
So it's what allows us to type in google.com instead of memorizing a string of numbers.
Precisely. And by monitoring DNS traffic, a SOC can detect attempts to connect to known malicious websites or those command and control servers that attackers use.
So it's like having a Border Patrol agent checking passports at the gateway to your network.
Another great analogy. You're on a roll today.
Well, I'm learning a lot. So NDR is watching the traffic inside the network, and DNS monitoring is watching the connections going out to the wider internet.
They're like two sides of the same coin working together to keep the bad guys out.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've got the platform, SceneSort, EDR, Light, ADR, NDR, DNS monitoring. It's a pretty impressive arsenal.
It is, and it's all part of that holistic approach. And that's where a partner like Cuebid can really make a difference.
Yeah, they talk a lot about partnership in their guide. It sounds like they're not just selling technology, they're helping organizations build that comprehensive security posture.
Exactly. Their MDR service is all about working closely with organizations to understand their unique needs, customize solutions, provide ongoing support and guidance.
So they're not just a vendor. They're a trusted advisor.
That's the goal.
Well, folks, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the ever-evolving threat landscape to the different ways you can implement a SOC.
It's been a great conversation.
It has. And if there's one thing we hope you take away from this deep dive, it's this. In today's world, a SOC is not a luxury. It's a necessity.
Couldn't agree more.
It's an investment in your organization's future. It's about protecting your data, your reputation, and ultimately your success.
Well said.
So if you're ready to take your cybersecurity to the next level, to build a SOC that's not just robust, but truly holistic, we highly recommend checking out Cuebid and their MDR service.
Great advice.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Until next time, stay safe out there.
Stay secure, everyone.